The information economy has arrived. The world is teeming with innovation as new business models reinvent every industry. InsideAnalysis is your source of information and insight about how to make the most of this exciting new era. Learn more at InsideAnalysis.com.
InsideAnalysis.com.
And now, here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the future indeed. It's time for Inside Analysis, the only coast-to-coast radio show that's all about the information economy. Your host, Eric Kavanagh here, yours truly. A couple of great guests today, and we're going to talk about something that is applicable to just about everyone who has ever flown on an airplane, and that's most people in the modern world. We're going to talk about how a variety of technologies can converge to create a much better experience for people flying on airplanes. We've all had flights canceled. I'm sure we've all had flights delayed. And I even once had a flight canceled and I didn't have my driver's license on me. And the next flight wasn't for a couple of days. I had a passport, but you can't rent a car with a passport. You need a driver's license. We were in New York. We had to get to Pittsburgh for another show. I wound up taking the train. So if you ever want to find out how the other third lives, just hop on Amtrak and go from New York to Pennsylvania, and you'll realize that, it's still running. It's still out there. But customer experience is the key, folks. Customer experience is what keeps customers coming back. And so the companies that really do a good job of leveraging modern technologies, they're the ones who can stay on top of things. So today we're going to talk about really the combination of numerous technologies, chatbots. We're going to talk about machine learning. We're going to talk about analytics, data capture. We're going to talk about information delivery, texting, messaging, things of this nature, and kind of how all that comes together to help airlines provide a much better experience for their customers. So if you think about what happened with COVID, wow, the airline industry took a huge hit. I mean, some of the stats I saw were like a 90% drop in bookings, which you can imagine is just a mind-blowing number. And so all these airlines had to really sharpen their pencils and figure out, how are we going to stay alive? How are we going to maintain customer service? What can we do? And what's cool is they were able to use, some of them at least, this combination of technologies. So many of you now know chatbots. They pop up on many of these websites and ask you, hey, can I help you out? Well, chatbots are fantastic, especially if they are fueled with AI and fueled with data, with customer data. Because one of the things they can do is very quickly ascertain which kinds of requests are simple. So what is the phone number for the service desk? Bing, that's an easy thing to serve up via automation. Or just basic information about flights. You can type in the flight. It goes, okay, here's your information. Once it gets a bit more complicated, the chatbot typically needs to bring in an actual customer service rep. But the thing is, if it's designed properly, once that transfer takes place, the customer service rep has all the information right at their fingertips. They don't have to ask you all these questions about who you are, where you're going, where are you now. All this stuff has already been captured and processed and sent to this person. And then if a company is really clever, what they can do is in the background, they've been scanning around for other available flights. And so the machines, if you will have a recommendation for the customer service rep of the best way to get back on track with this customer. So there are all of these wonderful things that can be done if you use the technologies that are available. So today we're going to talk to Ido Bornstein HaCohen. He's with a company called Verint. They do customer experience. They have a whole range of technologies that they use to help companies optimize what is often called CX. And we have the inimitable Evan Kirstel with us today. He's an industry analyst who tracks all of these different trends and really focuses on AI and machine learning, but also social media, communications, and he has some recent fun stories to tell us as well. So first, I'll throw it over to Ido Bornstein HaCohen. Tell us a bit about yourself and Verint and what you folks are doing in the space of optimizing customer experience.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Eric. Really appreciate you having me on the show today. Really excited, to speak about these topics. And like you mentioned, Verint is a customer engagement company. We're a customer engagement platform. And we allow people, brands basically, to engage with their customers. And we provide them with the tools to do that, from the very basics of workforce management. So, scheduling people to sit in specific shifts, all the way through customer engagement. So you mentioned chatbots, you mentioned automation, you mentioned, data and channels. We bring all of those together to create a seamless customer experience and enable brands to really delight their customers as they're engaging with them. And today we're going to speak about some of the experience that we've had over the last year as it relates to airlines.
Yeah, let's dive into that. I'm glad you mentioned too the back office side of this equation, right? So think about scheduling, who needs to come in today. Think about the pilots and, of course, the stewardesses and so forth, and all the different people involved, all the people who take the cargo off the planes. In terms of understanding who you have to have in the field, well, that's a direct result of how many passengers are going to be coming through, of how many flights are going to be coming through. So again, the more clever you are in automating certain tasks, or at least automating recommendations for decision makers to base their decisions on, the better off you're going to be in terms of managing what is a very unwieldy and, well, let's use the word turbulent scenario, right, Ido?
Definitely, 100%. And when you think about it, Verint has been doing a lot of work to actually make this engagement seamless. Right, like one of the things that we've been doing, I actually was a CEO of a startup company that was acquired by Verint back in August of last year. Right, we were very much focused on the new ways of customer engagement, what we call digital engagement, bringing together, chatbots that we see, automated conversational interfaces with actual people who are representing the brand, and making it very easy for people like you and I who are trying to engage with them and get some information, get the data, first of all, get access to that data, right? And then again, get whatever we need to have resolved in a very easy and seamless way, right? And we've seen throughout the years that this is one of the main things that actually promotes loyalty, right? And when you think about, some of the challenges that the airlines have been going through over the last, 2 years or so, loyalty becomes super important, right? And it's not only for airlines, by the way. It's every industry and vertical that you can think of has to have some sort of a way to engage with their customers. So we also saw it when it came to e-commerce, right? So one of the most interesting stats that is being mentioned, throughout the last year or so, is that the pandemic, COVID, has actually propelled e-commerce and airlines and customer engagement 6 years into the future.
Wow!
So when you think about it, right, there is although it has been a very challenging period for a lot of brands, for us as consumers, there's some benefits, right? There's some positive that we can see as a result of it, and part of it is really making it really easy for us to get the information that we need, to have control over the things that are happening to us in our lives, and especially as it relates to, to airlines. We're going to give a few examples today of, what the airlines have seen. But when you think about it, you're getting ready to go on a flight, Eric, and then you suddenly get a message that your flight has been canceled. Or maybe you don't even get a message. You get to the airport, only there to find, right, that your flight has been canceled. Right. We could do that a lot better. Right? I mean, both from notifying the customer that something has happened, all the way through amending it and changing it, right? Allowing the customer to do it, to have control, to do it on their own, but also allowing the people within the brand, within the airline, to have access to all of the information, whether it be the customer information or the flight information, so they can manage it in a simple, coherent way, and really make it easy for the consumers and delight the consumers and the people who are supposed to be flying. So, technology is making, a lot of improvements in the way that we just live our lives.
Yeah, those are great examples. And, I'm just thinking to myself, as you're talking of all the different ways that the manifestation of these technologies coming together will help us, something as simple as getting an alert enough of time ahead of time to where I don't go to the airport, because I got the alert that says, ding, your flight is delayed until 7 p.m. tonight when it's only 2 p.m. Well, now I know not to drive and sit there in the airport for 3.5, 4 hours before getting on the flight. That's a simple thing. Or even the geolocation data letting you know when a gate change happens, for example. Or if the flight is getting, let's say the time to the flight is getting very close, letting you know and say, you're supposed to be at gate 39, and I can tell by your geospatial data that you're at gate 9. So you got 30 gates to go. I mean, these are just examples of how geospatial technology, RFID, your phone, of course, being a key component at the edge, if you will, the algorithms in the background, tracking all this stuff. When that all comes together seamlessly, that's a very positive experience. And I think people are very forgiving and thankful for that kind of communication, and even letting you know that your bags have been loaded, for example. All these little bits and pieces of information. Well, that's what the airline was supposed to be tracking anyway. But now to give visibility to the customers, that's really opening up a nice thread of dialogue, and it makes the customers feel pretty good, right, Ido?
Absolutely. Absolutely. You know, we as humans, the more data we have, the more we know what's going on around us, you know, the calmer we become. And you know, especially in times of crisis. And you know, a flight cancellation could be considered as a crisis. If you're going to visit, you know, your friends, your family, you were supposed to go on a, you know, on a holiday with your family, you know, a flight being canceled or being delayed, that, you know, that causes a lot of anxiety and stress. The more we can be proactive around it, the more we can share information in advance and provide people with the, you know, the control to actually change things on their own, the happier that the happier they will be. Not only that, I think one of the other things that we have to remember is the vast, you know, amount of volume that these type of companies need to handle, right? If you need to find a way, you know, brands need to find a way to manage that, you know, what we call the capacity gap. Right. So the number of people that are reaching out to you and the number of people that you can actually handle. And when I say handle, you know, we always think about phone agents. We always think about calling up an airline. It doesn't have to be that way anymore.
Right.
Right. You could utilize the same type of communications that you're using with your friends and your family, you know, from messaging, text messages, emails, right? And one of the things that we do is we bring them all together. We bring them all together to create that seamless experience. So, you know, you are presented as one in front of the brand, and you can have a continuous conversation with that brand.
That's just fantastic stuff. And let's bring in Evan Kirstel here, our industry analyst friend, and he's on the road right now. So you've been doing some travel recently, Evan. What have you seen in terms of airlines really getting it, figuring it out, and passing that benefit on to their customers?
Well, it's a mixed bag. I was recently on JetBlue and had an amazing experience from check-in through, in flight, right through getting my bags, and kudos to them. But let's face it, up until pretty recently, the contact center within the airline has been, you know, a bit of a crap show. I mean, it's been, you know, the contact center is something, you know, put together with duct tape and spit and glue. And when COVID hit, all of a sudden you were facing 15, 20-hour wait times for a call, just an old-fashioned telephone call. So on one hand, we have all this amazing technology that you described so well available, but it's been the deployment, the adoption, the training, the enablement, the integration of all this technology. And it kind of took COVID to kind of turbocharge that transformation. So it's great to see progress being made, but it's very spotty, and airlines really need to embrace, digital transformation, because we're getting back to pre-pandemic travel levels, and customers' expectations have been turned upside down. We're all kind of angry, slightly pissed off, and impatient. and so we're used now to getting our medicine delivered by telehealth. We're used to getting our DoorDash delivered at home. Now we want our travel services delivered in the same fashion. And I think the airlines that don't step up and adopt these new platforms and tools and methodologies are going to be left in the dust.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm glad you brought up the integration side too, because without that integration, unless you have closed the loop, essentially, unless you have effectively integrated all the component systems necessary to achieve your objective, you're I won't say you're nowhere, but you're certainly not at the desired state, right? And there are lots of different systems that have to come into play here: the booking systems, the airline systems, the FAA systems, the consumer systems, the devices. What kind of device do I have? What kind of app do I have? Making sure that app is up to date. There are lots of I's that need to be dotted and T's crossed in order to get there. And that just takes time, right, Evan? I mean, you have to test things and get them bulletproof. And then once it's proven, once you know it's going to work, that's when you roll it out, but not before, right, Evan?
Yeah, I've been told we've seen about 5 years of transformation happen in about 18 months, so during the pandemic, but we still have a long way to go. And it really is the meeting customers where they are. I mean, if it's someone like me who's glued to Twitter and social media, and having Facebook Messenger support or direct message support on social, kids are more tech savvy and tech centric or iMessage centric. Others are focused on telephone. They want to talk to a real person, not go through a terrible IVR and sit on hold for hours.
Right.
Maybe have a call back while they're instead of waiting on hold. So you really have to, omni-channel is kind of the way to go, and multi-channel to meet that customer, young versus old, where they are in their preferences.
And that is such an excellent point. And folks, I can tell you the companies that really get this, what they've done is they've built a profile for their customers. Maybe they have a set of personas, or maybe they build individual profiles for every customer, certainly for high value customers and kind of on the way down. But what Evan's referring to is noticing by looking at the machine data where people get their information, noticing, hey, Bob tends to interact on his phone, Jim tends to interact by email, Susan tends to interact by SMS messages, or whatever the case may be. You can see that if you capture the data. If you capture the data and analyze the data, the machines can do that kind of work in the background. They can just check the totality of interactions with a particular customer and then sort out, 72% of the time it's a text message, 10% of the time it's a telephone call, 8% of the time it's online, the rest is other, for example. That's a perfect example of a company that has paid attention to their customers. And what do you want? If you go to a restaurant to order steak well done and a Merlot, and they deliver you salmon and a white wine, you're going to be an unhappy customer because they didn't pay attention to your preferences. They didn't pay attention to what you wanted from them. Well, in this case, yeah, we just want to get on the plane and get everything tackled. But the companies that pay attention and see how does this person act with us? What is their lifetime value to the organization? All these little bits and pieces can be assembled to get a very clear view of who someone is. And then this person prefers to be called. And so you call them. You can even do that on the other side. I mean, I remember learning about this 20 years ago, what some people call skill path routing. You figure out who in the customer service center is good with dealing with this kind of transaction or that kind of transaction. If you've done that as well, now you're optimizing the back end and front end, and you're really humming on all cylinders. So folks, don't touch that dial. I'll be right back after these messages. You are listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
Take us to the future.
All right, folks, take us to the future indeed. Take me to the future where everything works perfectly. That's what I want, especially when you're traveling and going to airports and so forth and bouncing all around. Today, we're talking to Ido Bornstein HaCohen of Verint and Evan Kirstel, an industry analyst, talking all about the airline industry. We're teasing a report that's going to be coming out later this month, I believe, which kind of dove into a lot of these subjects. And we're really talking about the confluence of best practices and available technologies, things like messaging, things like omni-channel. We heard Evan mention in the last break. And I remember the first time I heard omni-channel, I was like, oh man, that doesn't sound good. What are they talking about now? And what they mean is you have lots of channels for communication: email, SMS, phone calls, Facebook messaging, LinkedIn messaging, Twitter messaging. Those are all channels. And so the companies that are really smart and capable, what they're doing is they are opening up all of those channels to receive information and then understand who wants to use which channel for communication. I happen to know from experience, some senior executives at really big companies, they like LinkedIn messaging. That's what they do. Send them an email, you're not going to get back anything. Send them a text, nothing. But an email chat, yes, they'll get right back to you. So you learn, and machines can do this easily. Machine learning can figure that stuff out. I mean, it takes some time. It takes a couple of algorithms. And the key is to be proactive. So I'm going to throw that over to Ido of Verint. You know, a lot of companies were very reactive, of course, when COVID hits, and you're never really in the best situation if you're just reacting to the environment around you. What you want to be is proactive. You want to see things coming as best you can, and then make sure you get on the game early in the ball game, if you will, to stay on top of things. But Ido, what do you think about being proactive in this particular domain?
So I think, this is where making data-driven decisions, becomes key, right? And when you have the data, when you connect the data to your engagement system, you could actually start being proactive around it as well. If you know that there's a flight that is going to be canceled, you don't, have to wait for people to reach to the airport and come to the counter or, open their app, even more so to see that, there's a flight delay or flight cancellation or any type of disruption, right? You can get a notification, and even more so, you could get a notification with the means to actually resolve it on your own.
Yes.
And if you can't resolve it on your own, if you don't want to resolve it on your own, brands should, and airlines should enable you to actually, be able to reach out to an agent. What we've seen throughout COVID is that the wait times, especially over the phone, were just insane, right? And people got into a place where they were saying, if you make it easy on me to just do it on my own, I don't need you. I don't need to speak to an agent. I don't need to, wait online. I could actually, or wait on the phone, right? I could actually do it on my own. But in order to do that, you have to be, data driven. You have to be able to connect. It's, we kind of talked about, some of the, not as good implementations, or some would say shitty implementations of, chatbots, right? Pardon my French. But one of the reasons for that is that those implementations did not leverage real data. Real live data. They were not connected to the booking system, to the e-commerce system. Once you do that, once you connect it, you can actually start getting operational data and act on it. And once you can act on it, you can be more proactive around it. And when you are proactive, this is where your customers become much happier, because they don't have to wait for something to break, right? Or for them to realize that something is broken. You let them know that something is wrong, and you give them you empower them to actually fix it on their own.
That's right. Yeah. And just to give our audience an example here, let's say your flight is canceled and you get a text message from the airline that says, hey, your flight is canceled, but this flight is available at this time and that flight is available at that time. Would you like to book one of these flights? Click yes. Yes. Or you could just have them click the flight number, for example, and then say, yes, I want this flight. Another text comes back. Okay, we think you want this flight. Please click here to confirm, because there are a lot of accidental touches on phones, especially like you didn't hit the right button. You don't want to automatically transact, but you give it a confirmation. And then guess what? You just saved yourself all sorts of time and effort. You saved your call center. You saved any number of people who would have to have stepped in to resolve this problem. You just solved the problem in 1 or 2 clicks, right, Ido?
Absolutely. And, hearing you kind of describe that, even I feel, alleviated and delighted, right? It just feels easy. And when these type of things are easy, you want to go back to, to getting more flights from that company and, from that airline, and you want to keep on, working with them. And that's what we're aiming for, that type of that type of loyalty.
Yeah, that's a great example. And Evan, I'm going to throw a fun little curveball at you here. My wife said something prophetic a few years ago that is it's appropriate in this context. She one time said, because she studied yoga and actually taught yoga and meditation and so forth, and she said, it takes an hour to do an hour of meditation. And the reason I say that is because as busy professionals, we often forget how much time little things take. Sending an email, making a phone call, reading an article, just finding the next flight. All of these tasks take real time to accomplish. And you often don't notice what you spend your time on until you look back and start examining it. And that's something that these machines can do for us to understand. It takes this amount of time to have a call center person resolve an issue. It takes that amount of time for this system to resolve that issue. So in all cases, you want to automate as much as possible. And like Ido said, you must be connected to the systems themselves. You cannot have these chatbots living in isolation or in some abstract world that is not connected to your reality. Otherwise, you're wasting time and you're really making a bad experience even worse, right, Evan?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look at best practices in the industry. 2 of my favorite companies as a consumer are Amazon and Apple. If I were to break my phone right now, Apple would have a new phone at my doorstep in 2 hours, hand delivered from the closest Apple store. If I actually got a package that I wanted to return to Amazon last week, they said, you know what, you're a good customer. It's more expensive to take it back. Just keep it, and we'll refund your charge. And that's based on knowing your customer, knowing my identity, and just having all this data at my fingertips. And the airlines have to try to emulate these kind of best practices. It won't be easy. They have a lot of legacy, a lot of baggage, no pun intended, but it can be done through best practices, working with expert vendors like Verint and many others, and having the right leadership to drive change and adoption and transformation. So there's nothing stopping airlines from having an Apple or an Amazon experience. And I will say, one of my favorites is JetBlue here in Boston, and they're getting pretty close. So it can be done.
Yeah, and you mentioned a couple things here, even in the pre-call, and I'll just point out that consumers now understand things like QR codes, for example. We understand barcodes. We've had barcodes for decades now, and there's still barcodes on just about every product that you buy in the store. And consumers are starting to better understand things like our RFID. There's some good commercials I've seen on TV that kind of explain why RFID matters. But you had mentioned before the call, baggage. Well, there's a tag on your bag. They scan the tag when they grab it. They scan the tag when they put it on the plane. They scan the tag when they drop it off. So you know that your stuff has been scanned and you know where it is. This gets back to knowing versus not knowing. And anyone's ever lost a bag knows that is not a pleasant experience to lose the bag. And before the airlines had nailed down what is a fairly simple process of putting tags on the bags. You get the machines, you can sync it up with your point of sale solutions and so on and so forth. Then you know where those bags are and you feel better. Even if someone tells you, okay, yes, your bag is actually in Houston, at least they know it's there.
I put an AirTag in my bag, the Apple tracking device, and I actually can confirm with a certainty within a few feet where my bag is. So, airlines could adopt things like AirTags and, as you said, RFID and other advanced IoT technologies. It's not just customer experience. It's about, everything from 5G to IoT to machine vision and tracking and natural language processing, so that these voice systems mimic human behavior, human voice, and natural language understanding. So lots of opportunities for tech.
Yeah, and I'll throw that one over to Ido. NLP, as it's called, natural language processing, has made tremendous advances, and that's thanks to very large companies like Google getting involved. Of course, it's thanks to lots of small companies doing innovative stuff. But the point is, NLP is a lot further along than it was even 5 years ago. And so to leverage that capability, again, gets us every inch closer to the seamless experience, right? I think that's one fun way to look at it. Is you may never get completely seamless, but it's like if you're getting closer and closer, at least the experience is getting better and you're having to waste less time and be less frustrated. So the NLP advances, I think, have really helped in the chatbot space. What do you see, Ido?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that we're seeing from a natural language processing and a natural language understanding standpoint is that you can actually understand the intent. You can understand what people are actually talking about. Take airlines as an example. If we look at the kind of the time graph from the beginning of the pandemic until today, and we look at and we analyze it using NLP and using the intent-based what people are actually talking about, it became very clear to see that in March 2020, most people were talking about, cancellations. We need to cancel our flight. We can't fly. What do we do with it? And then it started changing, right? In May, people were asking about, okay, I know that I can't fly, right? But now help me understand, when am I going to get my refund? Can I get my money back? How is that going to happen? And then, move all the way to March 2021. This is when people started saying, okay, so I've got a voucher, right? Or I've got a coupon. How do I use that coupon? And the more we can leverage the data, the natural language understanding to actually, guide us towards the future, the better place we'll be. And that's how we leverage data, right? That's how we leverage data to have better conversations. It's think of it as just the conversation even that we're having right now.
Right.
Okay. It's, the more conversations like that we're going to have, the more we'll be able to anticipate, we'll know one another better, and we'll be able to anticipate what, each one of us is going to say. right?
That's
And as a result of that, we'll be able to, to be more, to have a better conversation. And that's exactly what's happening with NLP and, what's happening with that type of technology.
Yeah, you make such a really, really good point there, Ido, and I'll bring in Evan to kind of comment on this, because in conversation, the beautiful thing about a live conversation as opposed, for example, to asynchronous communication on email is that you can course correct immediately. I can be talking to Evan and I can see that, I can just sense that he's gotten off track or he misinterpreted what I said, and I can jump back in and say, no, I want to make sure I'm in LA as in Louisiana, not LA as in Los Angeles or something. So it's in that conversation, you can have immediate impact on making sure that the person on the other end of that phone line is understanding what you're saying. And I think NLP really in conjunction with workflow and syntax capabilities technologically is getting closer. And then you can just look at even simple things like tone of voice, right? There are lots of companies, I think Verint probably has something to say about this as well. Tone of voice can be ascertained. It's not too difficult to figure out when someone is PO'd on the phone. And so that should send a red flag like ding, ding, ding. Okay, this customer is unhappy. What can we do to make them happy? Give them a free drink, give them a free trip, give them something to sort of assuage those concerns. So just two comments real quick, Evan. The advancement of NLP being able to mimic real conversation, but also this ability to kind of understand that something needs to change and to send in that offer. What do you think about all that, Evan?
Oh, it's really amazing. And if anyone has tried or experienced some of the latest tech, it is nothing like the bad IVRs that we see out there. Press 1 for English, press 2 to speak with sales, press 18, and you're just trapped in these systems which have been designed 10 years ago, which are still deployed in the field. And, talk about language. You have multiple languages support. It can understand Spanish and English and German and French, and it can have a reasonable conversation up to a point that might solve 90% of items without having to wait on hold for an operator or an agent. So, the key is just let's get this technology out there. Let's get adoption going. Let's begin to delight consumers and not sort of hide from them behind these terrible legacy systems that we run into too often because they're just so off-putting. There's a whole industry built around how to reach an operator, how to press 0 in these different IVR trees. And people are kind of fed up with that. They want to be delighted and freed from these prisons of music on hold and IVRs. That's my rant. I'm finished. Sorry about that.
No, that was actually a good rant. And I love the way you described that. Hide behind. You don't want to, if your company is still using these outdated technologies and you have the capacity to upgrade, which you should if you have cash flow, right? If you have revenue coming in or you have some cash lying around, you should be able to start upgrading these systems because otherwise.
That's a great point. That's a great point because, these are not, people talk about customer service as a cost center, but a lot of airlines see these as revenue centers. As when you talk to a customer, you can upsell, cross-sell, offer add-ons, and certainly even pick up new customers like on social media when you have a team behind the social accounts offering vacations and other packages. So
what a
really
good point. Let's talk about that after the break. Cost centers versus revenue centers. Great point. We'll be right back. You're listening to Inside Analysis.
Welcome back to Inside Analysis. Here's your host, Eric Kavanagh.
All right, folks, back here on Inside Analysis. We're talking to a couple very clever gentlemen here. We're talking to Ido Bornstein HaCohen of Verint, that's Verint, if you want to look these folks up, and Evan Kirstel, industry analyst, all about the airline industry. We've got a report that's coming out probably later this month, the Guide to Modern Airline Customer Engagement. And again, think about unpleasant experiences versus seamless experiences. Everyone wants a seamless experience when you go to the airport. It's fun to travel places to see new things, but it's not fun at all when your flight gets canceled and then you're standing in a line. Just think about when this has happened. When it happened to me last time, I just saw these black clouds rolling into New York. I was like, oh man, this is not looking good. And sure enough, flights started being delayed, flights started being canceled. And we were in some deep trouble. And I remember seeing this line of people. I'm talking hundreds of people in a line at an airport waiting for one person behind a kiosk to solve all their problems. I mean, can you imagine how unhappy each and every one of those people were? It was not a pretty experience. But if you use the technologies we're talking about today, and it's really the combination, and it must be integrated properly, chatbots, machine learning, connected to real systems, booking systems, for example, you get that all sewn together. You don't have to stand in those lines anymore, because all those customers are going to get texts on their phone that they're going to be given options for how to resolve their problems. And Ido, I mean, you almost can't even compare those two experiences, waiting in a line of 175 people versus getting a text and then just going to the restaurant to eat some food while you're waiting for your flight. It's a pretty big difference, right, Ido?
100%. You could actually be at the restaurant already eating your food while you're doing that. I mean, I think the easiest way to equate would be, getting a car service before Uber and getting a car service after Uber.
Right.
It's just a click of a button and that's it. You don't have to do anything more than that. Right. And that's the type of experience that we're trying to shoot for. Yeah. Right. We're not there yet. The world is not there yet. But, I think that there's steps that can be taken for airlines to be there. And those that are going to be there will be the ones who are going to strive. And those that will not be able to get there or are not going to get there are going to be the ones who probably will diminish. And, we won't see them in the future.
That's exactly right. And, you bring excellent point bringing up Uber. I'll throw this over to Evan, because thanks to the cloud, thanks to the ubiquity of devices like smartphones and the ubiquity of services like Amazon and Uber, what happens is someone innovates like Uber and everyone can see that innovation. And so now we know what's possible. So we're like, oh, well, why aren't you doing this? Why aren't you doing this? We see this even internally at companies when they're trying to use their legacy systems for analytics, for example, or data science, whatever the case may be. And they see how easily some of these big companies do that stuff. That changes expectations, and expectations drive change, right, Evan?
Yes, indeed. And change is the one imperative. And unfortunately, it's not that easy. If it were easy, everyone would be doing what Apple and Uber and Amazon do. It takes, it's kind of rocket science what Verint does. It's kind of, building magical experiences with the latest machine learning and advanced technologies. And you kind of have to think differently and experiment. And it takes a whole new approach to deployment and design and user experience. So you kind of have to find partners or hire the right IT folks to implement these kind of solutions. And it's not just for service. I mean, these solutions can be transformational. Uber didn't just disrupt the taxi industry. I mean, they changed the entire automotive business in many different ways and will continue to. And, these technologies in airline can be about service, can be about sales, can be about marketing, and all other kinds of customer and consumer engagement. So they do have the power to be quite transformational, just beyond just replacing the back end legacy system.
Yeah, that's also a really good point. And for companies that have lots of what they call legacy software or technical debt, as it's sometimes referred to, that can be a bit of a challenge. But I guess, Ido, I'll throw this one over to you. You talked about the importance of being proactive. I think every business person today knows that cloud is if not the new center of gravity. I think that on-prem data centers are going to have a very long life. They're not going away anytime soon. But what you do in your data center will be different in 5 years than what you did 5 years ago, for sure. There still will be use cases for that. But the bottom line is you must embrace what's coming down the pike. If you don't, you're going to get overrun by it, basically. And it really pays to know what you have. And you need to have people on your team who are researching what is available today. What services does Amazon provide? What services does Azure provide? What services do best of breed companies like Verint provide? It's really imperative to know that and be able to kind of map that across your systems to figure out what it's going to take to integrate these things. What is it going to take to connect live to these systems. A lot of that boils down to APIs and some of these new ways of just integrating systems, right? We used to do it in a much more manual and brittle way, and now it's RESTful APIs, which will handle whatever request comes their way, right? So you really have to embrace the integration technologies and know what's out there, and that's changing by the day, right, Ido?
Absolutely. So it's all about integration technologies, cloud technologies. It's all about making sure that you're building an open platform, making sure that your, even the legacy systems that you have within your organization are able to talk through APIs with, cloud-based systems. And this is kind of the basis of the magic that brings it all together. Yeah. Right. When you think about our system as an example, it's not about doing everything. It's about getting all of the data that is needed to make customer engagement magic.
Yeah. And it can be any number of things, but you do have to start somewhere. Maybe, Evan, I'll throw this over to you for, let's say there's an airline executive listening to this and they're not really doing what JetBlue is doing, for example. What's some advice you can give for where to start? Is it, maybe a customer service application? Do you start with a particular app, or do you start by mapping out what you have available? What are your thoughts on how to get the ball rolling?
Yeah, it's all about building a learning organization and creating proof of concepts and building kind of innovation from the ground up. Look for opportunities to introduce new features and services incrementally, and then gradually create kind of a virtuous circle of new opportunities and development. Too often executives are, even CIOs, they're afraid of breaking this infrastructure they patched together over a decade. And I think you got to be more bold in their thinking in terms of adoption of this new technology, not just worrying about the phones being down. Too many people are just trying to keep the lights on and be staying out of the news, and that's not going to get you to the next level.
If you want to see a good example of a company like that, Volaris is one of the airlines that has been really phenomenal in adopting and changing, digital transformation, right? So, and if you look at the impact that this has made on them as a company, they're now, in Mexico, they're a local, airline out of Mexico, and they're the biggest airline in Mexico right now.
Wow.
Yeah, another example is Emirates out of Dubai, where I've last flown there. The entire check-in process was based on facial recognition from the desk to the lounge to the airplane. Never once did I have to get my ticket out or my boarding pass or talk to a person. It was seamless through several cameras that you went through, which had my passport on file. So internationally that's a requirement anyway. So yeah, what a just amazing experience, and took so much time out of the boarding process.
And there again, anytime you're waiting in a line, this is my rule of thumb, right? If you're waiting in a line, something is wrong. Like someone screwed something up. I've been to, I think, 17 or 18 jazz fests in New Orleans. And I'll tell you one thing they figured out early in the ball game is when you do these big festivals and you have 80,000 people on the fairgrounds watching these shows, you know what they do? They set up lots of lines for the beer tent. It's not just one person, it's like 20 people, and they go all the way around, and they're like, pow, 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 just sending them out the door. That's what you have to do. You have to adapt to the environment around you. And podcast bonus segment is coming up next, but I think what we'll talk about is distributed systems and single points of failure. What Evan was referring to is a so-called single point of failure. The phone system, if the phone system is an archaic system and it goes down, that was a single point of failure, and that failure will cost you dearly. But what you're seeing now is many of these new systems are distributed systems. So if something goes down, it's part of the app. It's not the whole app. It's a function inside the app, for example. It's not the entire application that crashes. And so distributed systems are much more fault tolerant. That's what they were designed to be. They were designed to be able to handle that kind of scenario where you get a spike in activity, and you don't want those spikes to wind up causing tremendous trouble for your customers. Well, folks, podcast bonus segment is up next. Hop online to InsideAnalysis.com. You've been listening to Inside Analysis.